This is the Context Podcast sponsored by Proofgeist. I'm your host, Jeremy Brown. In this episode, Cris and I talk about how machine learning works, what we can do with it, and its implications. He gives us many examples. I even stumble on some of those, and we discuss how machine learning is used all around us. Cris also shares the story behind this powerful prediction model he's built that has been featured in many places. Machine learning is a powerful and exciting / scary tool, and Cris is here to highlight all that we can know about machine learning. Hey, Cris, welcome back to the Context Podcast. How are you today?
Jeremy, I am really excited to be here. Thanks for letting me be a guest on the show.
Wait, Cris, is that you? What's going on? Hey.
Okay, you got me. This is actually CrisBot, a machine learning model of Chris's voice.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. That sounded just like you.
It is a machine learning model of my voice. I've been training
Wow.
it for most of the past year. It's a
Oh,
little side experiment of mine. I'm hoping I could get it to pass the Turing test. And then I don't actually have to record videos anymore. I can just type them and feed it to the model. We'll see if that works. I don't know if it fooled you, but I'm working on it. It might need a year or so.
so let me get this straight. You are a FileMaker developer, but you're working with machine learning right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. My career for the past 20 plus years has been exclusively in FileMaker. And as integrations have been introduced into our platform, I've become really fascinated with the machine learning model aspect, not only as it crosses over into our work, but just as consumers. We are literally living in a machine learning world, and I can't not stare right at it from a work perspective.
That's a really interesting thought that we're living in a machine learning world now. What makes you say that? What do you see that is evidence?
Like everything we do, if you really look at it from a consumer or even an entertainment perspective, it's probably the easiest. Think about your Netflix experience or your Amazon experience. It's very much driven by the likes and the dislikes and the actions that you're taking. Everything's being recorded in these individual models. There's literally dozens and dozens of models that represent Jeremy and Cris floating out there. Netflix has one, Amazon has one, Apple has one, Google probably has like hundreds. But the point is, all these are there to try to serve our likes and dislikes and try to present stuff that makes sense to us out in front of us, probably for the sake of consumer decisions. But there's other things that are all around us that are happening. These models are everywhere. And businesses are using them at the highest levels. Businesses are using these models for their products and services. It gets pretty crazy. As a matter of fact, I think probably a good way to learn this is look at the extreme other side of machine learning. I'm going to blow your mind here, if that's okay. This is going to get crazy. This is a concept that I call woe code. There's low code and no code, and I want to introduce woe code to people. This is probably going to be, this might cause some existential crises for folks because it certainly has for me. And I know I'm billing this big, but I promise I can deliver on this. I have been particularly fascinated, concerned, and somewhat wowed to no degree by this model that's out there right now that revealed itself. I should say it came into the public domain last April in 2020, and it's called the GPT-3 model from an organization called OpenAI. I was so unnerved by this that I kept this information to myself, even from my coworkers, for many months until I just was so deep in the pool on it that I had to start revealing what I was finding. So first of all, GPT-3, which it's an acronym, of course, for Generative Pre-trained Transformer version 3, was created by this organization called OpenAI. They're a San Francisco-based AI research lab that used to be totally private, and they created a model. Now, it's the largest machine learning model in the world. Actually, I think it was just usurped by one in China. The new space race, by the way, are machine learning models. We don't care about defense and all that stuff anymore. It's all about data. So China just lapped the United States, but the one that is the most publicly available that actually has an API to it is this OpenAI's GPT-3. This model has 175 billion parameters. And to give you an idea, like those images that I was telling you about, like I was feeding it 50 images with like maybe 4 or 5 like sides of it. And so like imagine 175 billion parameters. The processing power that it would take the computers that we're recording this podcast on to run, it would take like 350 plus years to just process these models, to literally train the model with this data. The data set that GPT-3 uses, this is where it's going to blow your mind. is everything that's ever been on the internet ever, including all Wikipedia, all books that have ever been uploaded, everything code that runs the web pages themselves. It literally has taken all that data and used that as its data to train. Now there's methodologies when you get into deep learning like this that are not structured, where it just lets models go crazy on data and draw and learn its own stuff and draw its own conclusions. That's where we start to get a little worried, like the machine has become self-aware type stuff. But that's what's happening. And to tee this up, when GPT-3 came out in April of 2020, they actually stopped for a minute and said, "Whoa, hold up, we're going to take this back for a second because we're a little freaked out. Like the impact of what this is too much. So we want to make sure we build an API structure around this so that we know who's using it and we can just see what people are doing with it." So I dove into that community. I actually got my API key later in the summer or early fall of 2020. And I built a FileMaker sandbox with the GPT-3 machine learning model on the back end of it. And what and literally, like, I would spend time at my computer building things, and then I would have to step away for a moment and go, "Whoa, what in the world is happening here?" So what this allows you to do, way to for those of you that are Googling furiously, I urge you to check this out after the pod. But in the meantime, what I can tell you is this is like an exploded 175 billion parameter version of the type ahead feature that we see in Google, for example. When you type ahead, what time is it in Australia when it's 2 a.m. in the United States or whatever, like it's completing your thought based on searches that you've done before. It's Google has a million models of each person. So one of the models is what kind of stuff you look for on the internet. And if you're letting them track you, they can learn a lot about what you're probably thinking about. And so this is actually an NLP model or a text-based model that does the same type of type ahead predictive analysis. So I know what you're wondering, like, what does this mean? What can we do this for? This is the part where it's going to freak you out. I've got a FileMaker sandbox that's hooked up to the GPT-3 model that I can in an open text field. I can train the model and use the model in the same handful of words. For example, I've built an iSolutionsAi assistant, for example, where I can tell it about, here's iSolutions, this is what we do, this is how many offices we have, how many employees, the specialty we have. And by just simply feeding it those pieces of information, I can then now ask the model, all right, hey, iSolute, this is the kind of thing that you put on your website or built into your app or something. Hey, how many offices do you have? Or do you have anything near me in California? And it then has the intelligence to finish the rest of those sentences. Also has the ability to do question and answers. Or, for example, one that I did where I said I created a model that takes complex concepts and summarizes them in a manner that a 10-year-old could understand. Or the thing that people were doing with the GPT-3 model when it first came out was they were having it write articles for them. So literally people would be like reading a 2-page article about what GPT-3 is. You can find these all over the internet now because it was a kitschy, fun thing. And then the last paragraph is, oh, by the way, this was written by GPT-3. Like you literally can just go, hey, write a short comedy story about 2 fleas that live in an apple written in the style of Oscar Wilde. That was actually that sentence I just shared with you was actually a contest. Oh, there are actually contests out there where humans were supposed to pick the model, an article that was written by the model versus a person, and they were correct only 48% of the time. This is somewhat terrifying stuff, but the reality of it is we can use these things to do. I've built text classification models, keyword extractors, English to other language translation, the summary paragraphs for a 10-year-old to understand, slang to English converters. I even did a realtor speak model that takes what realtors say about a house, like a handyman special basically means it's falling apart, or motivated seller means the seller has no offer, like creating those kind of things for fun. But you may be wondering, how does something like GPT-3, how is this going to affect what we do for a living? And this is the part where I apologize to everyone for the potentially emotional reaction they might have to this information, but GPT-3 writes code. So in the same manner that you can type some text in a sentence and it spits back some stuff, there are models that are based on GPT-3 where you can say the following words: show me a scatter plot of daily precipitation over time, and it will return an SVG chart. Or say, build a model to clarify images into 5 groups. The data set has 25,000 images with an input shape of 500 by 500, and it will actually output that for you. There's one that I've been following that's, if you're interested, you can look into some of these things that have spun up based on GPT-3. The one I think you're going to, Jeremy, is this one called dbuild. I think it's dbuild.co. It allows users to dictate what they want as a website, and it generates React code and JavaScript. So you can simply describe it like semantically by saying, I want an input that says enter a to do and a button that says save the to do, and then show me all my to dos. And it will literally write that for you. So I think it's important. This is why I was so nervous. Like, I was unnerved by this information. So what does this mean? Something just happened a few weeks ago that I think people should pay attention to. First of all, I'm sad to report that while GPT-3 was this, like, literally from a company, an organization that's called OpenAI, it was out for the whole world to consume and do things with. But last September, an announcement came that an organization had licensed the exclusive perpetual rights to use GPT-3 for commercial purposes. And I think this might be one of the most significant things that happened in technology, honestly. That organization was Microsoft, but I'm compelled to buy some Microsoft stock because this is like a whole new world. And you wonder, what are they going to do with it? Here's where I'm going with all this. Check out Microsoft, the whole GitHub, Microsoft acquisition thing that's going on out in the world. Check out a product that's called GitHub Copilot. Have you heard of this?
I have. I
It
actually
it
downloaded it. Yeah.
so that is a Visual Studio Code extension, and it's powered by Codex. Codex is a new AI system that was created by, you guessed it, OpenAI, based on, you guessed it, the GPT-3 machine learning model. So for those that haven't checked it out, have you played with it? What was your experience? I'll let you talk about your
A little
experience.
bit. Todd's played with it a lot more. It's pretty amazing in what it can do. I'm still I like to type my own things, so I installed it, but it was supposed to like create an entire function in JavaScript based on what the variables that I was writing or the comments. I think that it was able to take the comments that I had written and turn that into a function. Is that correct?
That's exactly it. Yeah, you're describing the logic you want, and you let the Copilot assemble the code for you. And you talk to it. It's a docstring comment function name, or the code itself is what can be produced. But most people are training it. Like I was saying before, I would talk to this model by writing some text. Like, that's what you're doing in your comments. And the idea is that it will send out repetitive code patterns that it's seen elsewhere, or even either in your code or out in the universe of code. So to me, that's a huge glimpse into the future of what the coding experience might be like. And frankly, probably good in some degree. Nobody does more educating of JavaScript FileMaker integration than you, Jeremy. And you and I have talked about this a lot of times. Your lament, I think, is I just wish more people gravitate towards JavaScript as a tool for them to integrate. But the learning curve is certainly the issue, right? So what if we're a year or two away, or maybe less even, from people just saying, I want to have a library that does blah, 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 and then it presents itself in line within their FileMaker experience. To me, that's as no code as it gets. That's why I'm trying to come up with whoa code, because it's a little mind blowing.
So one of the things I've been working on, and as an aside, Chris, if we get done in time, I'd like to show you this repo that I've been working on. Chris, one of the things I've been working on is a JavaScript development environment, a place where people can download the template and just install it and start working with JavaScript. Maybe the next step in what you're saying is to lower the barrier even more. I think my environment does a pretty good job of getting people to code in VS Code and see the results in FileMaker right away. And then when you're done, you deploy it. The code is inline and pushed into your FileMaker file. But
Nice.
maybe what you're saying is we could take this a step further and I could say, hey, sentient overlord, GPT-3, whatever.
Right.
Um, I want to create a widget for my FileMaker app that will load data from FileMaker into the C3 charting library and display it in this web viewer named Web.
Uh,
And
Bingo. Yeah.
it could write the JavaScript because there are certain patterns we have to follow, right? We have to do the window dot and then write a function name that then is called by FileMakers, perform JavaScript in FileMaker, or perform JavaScript in a web viewer. And then we sometimes, if we do callbacks, we have to write the FileMaker.perform script and get the script name. So are you saying eventually we could just describe this and it will connect my JavaScript and my FileMaker app?
That's where I'm coming from with this. I'm not thinking, oh, We won't need developers anymore. I very much believe in the human element and the value that brings to the entire process, and I'm rooted in that position. But as as a fellow educator, this is why you and I have these conversations all the time. Like, learning curve is a real thing, and it presents fear to individuals or whatever, the obstacle of the unknown, whatever it is. If we can remove that with technology, I don't care how it works, but we remove that, imagine the impact that it can have, because we know the upside is real, but the entrance is the problem. So I think from a pure education standpoint, removing the need to have to learn these things is, I think, a huge upside. And then just look at how much, when we're talking about code, not like FileMaker programming per se, but like JavaScript programming, what percent of repetitive coding do you think you're doing? It's, one would argue that the existence of libraries in JavaScript is the fact that there's so much repetitive coding out there that we're just going to take this whole thing and repurpose it or tweak it just a little bit instead of start from scratch.
I could almost do, because part of what you have to do now, what I'm going to try to teach people is working with NPM, working with installing JavaScript libraries, using the Node package manager, and then importing them into your JavaScript. So potentially you have to type all that stuff, but you could just write a comment that says, I'm going to use these libraries and I'm going to connect it to this FileMaker file. And there's a script over there that I want you to connect to. And
Yep.
it generates that stuff for you. So
Sure. Or our friends at Claris, from an engineering standpoint, begin to lean this direction as far as what the coding experience is like. The biggest problem that Claris has right now, and I'm saying this because I know they're aware and even work with them on solving it, but is just getting people started, getting them from the inception of thought of a problem that they want to solve into an actual application. And to me, the answer for that very big problem for scaling the FileMaker industry is about the onboarding. And I feel strongly that machine learning in one way, shape, or form can solve that problem and just get people from inception of thought of problem into an actual app and then start using the capabilities of the platform there. I think that's what's going to save the platform,
that's
frankly.
interesting, because that does that seem too much? You mentioned whoa code,
Yeah.
but is that more scary than just trying to learn it yourself and trying to write the script steps? Is it more, is there a barrier there that people will have trouble getting over?
Yeah, you're gonna, much in the same way that you say, hey, if you're a project manager and you don't actually do development, is it valuable for me to know code when I see it? Sure, because you might be an extra set of eyeballs, or you might be auditing something or troubleshooting. So I think even when we're in these like machine learning worlds of coding, us humans are still going to have to be like driving the bus, right? To be able to react to these types of things. I also think strategic thinking and change management and different stuff like that very much involves a human element. And I think will always certainly be there and is necessary to a quality product. So this is what I'll propose to you. Did you think before we had phones and email and all this kind of stuff that you could fit 5 more hours of productivity into your day? You probably, those of us that were pre-email business folks, yourself excluded, I'm sure, would thought, "Oh, there's no way I could possibly get more done in this day." And then all of a sudden here we are in 2021 and it's, wait, I got 15 Zoom meetings, 80 emails that have to go out, all this different stuff. Like, we're living in that world now, so I think it's just going to be, when we take a lot of the rote exercise of what a lot of repetitive coding really is out of our world, we're just into the cool part. Like, I think all that's left is the cool stuff,
Yeah.
and making a difference. I think that's going to be good for all of us, really, users and developers.
I've talked to many FileMaker developers who say the worst part is having to do the same thing over and over in each app,
Yeah,
right?
I think that's the problem that we're talking about solving here. And frankly, it's already happening. What will we see in the FileMaker platform in the future? Who knows? What will we see in other platforms in the future? Who knows? But right now, I think it's important for people to have an awareness and understand different use cases of machine learning, both in practice and in concept, and think about trying to embrace that, if not just conceptually. But man, this next wave that's coming with the impact of what machine learning is going to have on development and use and the outcomes that software is providing in other platforms outside of FileMaker, it's going to be almost impossible for us to get another 10 years out of this career and ignore machine learning coming. So I think it's really important to have an awareness and education about what can be done with this stuff.
I do see an upside to this in that machine learning will get really good, but I assume it really can't handle ambiguity. So if you just say, I want you to, here's a ticket that says create a new record, that's not very descriptive. It has no idea what to do with that. But if someone has to describe it down to the last detail, you're going to get better at describing the use cases and describing the tickets and solving. And
I totally agree, and
yeah,
I think that provides hope for humans
yeah,
in the role that we'll play that we'll play here, certainly. It's very real, though. I really just think we're gonna pack more productivity into the same amount of hours that we have in our human days is really the main impact that it's gonna have. I don't think it's a replacement concern or anything like that, but definitely becoming aware of these things, I think, is gonna be paramount. And just understanding use cases and seeing what other people have done with these things is probably the best way to do it. Learn a little bit about the GPT-3 stuff, maybe the GitHub Copilot might be something that you play around with, or just in general, think about data differently. Think about where my data is pooling up within an organization or the applications that I'm creating, and then compare that to the conclusions that I think would make products, services, or support more meaningful to the organizations that we're catering to or our own. Frankly, I started with my own, not just as hobbyist stuff, but most of the ML stuff that I did was internal within our organization as a bit of a guinea pig. And that helps me understand it more, gives me a safe space to play around with it. And then I can talk about these wins as they pertain to data and problems that I wanted to solve. But mostly, I think the big thing is mindset. It's not necessarily that there's a problem and we need to solve it with machine learning. We want to look at what data we have and what intelligence that data sitting there, not doing anything, might have if we start letting it think amongst itself. And then how meaningful would the outcomes of that be to an organization? So that's what I would task individuals with as the immediate thing to start thinking about.
in your video you showed the vision model was able to return the image or the data of an image with a 99% accuracy. Is data like the general modeling that you were using and so forth, is that as accurate? Going back to your specific thing, when it suggested here's what your time should be, or here's the task that you're going to get, you're going to slow down on, was that always accurate or
Well,
to a 99% degree? Or
that's what you're shooting for. It's rare to get 100. 99's pretty much as confident as you can be. The confidence, that percentage, is very much part of the vernacular of machine learning. So when you dive into it, the word confidence and the percent number is like one of the 101 machine learning 101 things. So the way to think about it is, when I was saying before, oh, I want to do this project management rating, but I don't have enough data. I have enough data to do something that has a confidence of 30%. But what I want is more granular data or more iterations of data so that I can get that confidence level up higher. And if I can get it into the 90s or whatever, then I personally, as a human, have confidence that the predictions are going to be accurate as well, too. For example, even in my silly football thing, to bring it down to that, I have a thing where I go, I'm predicting that this player will have an outcome,
yep,
but my confidence of the outcome is either 25%, 50%, 75%, or 100% based on how much data I have on that player. So rookies that just came into the league, I'm like, yeah, he's going to do this weekend, but I'm 25% confident because I don't have a lot of data on this person. But then you look at the people who've been in the league for many years, for 20 years, and you go, oh, I'm 100, I'm 90% confident that this is what the outcome is going to be because I have more data. So the confidence thing is very much part of the model and very much part of how much you're going to lean on the model
yes,
in predictive analysis.
okay, okay. But it still, I mean, it still happened. Even if it came back with a very high confidence, it still could have been the wrong prediction
Sure.
in
Yeah.
real life. That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Sure.
yeah. It,
Yeah. Absolutely.
the player is either going to do really well or he's really not. Depending
Correct.
on that exact day, not just the data behind him.
And this is what I tell people all the time. They go, "Oh, you predicted that this guy would throw 2 touchdowns and do this, that, and the other, and he didn't do any of those things." Well, it's what the statement that we're actually making is the probability of this outcome is much higher than any other outcome. So if you're gonna that information, go ahead and do it. But across time, you'll have so many rights and so many wrongs based on just these are human beings running around on a grass surface throwing footballs into the air. Like anything could happen. But when you're talking about data with like how many products people order and at what time and what it takes, how long it takes for me to construct a project in our assembly cycle, those are way more predictive and structured, and therefore your confidence is easier to achieve, potentially even with smaller data sets if necessary.
I wonder if they teach this stuff in schools yet. Not necessarily college. I assume computer science degrees get it, but maybe business analyst degrees, or maybe business degrees for that matter, or even clear down as far as high school as they start to teach coding.
I certainly hope that it happens at the high school level. High schoolers right now have lived in are awash in a machine learning world. Like almost every aspect of their daily life is affected by machine learning, mostly because they're plugged into devices all the time. So that type of thinking doesn't even, you don't even have to introduce this to people. There's no whoa about it, right? It's just, oh yeah, of course. This I pick up my phone in the morning. It goes, usually when you pick up your phone, you're probably checking your email. So why don't we just take you to your email? Like, they get that. I think the thing with high schoolers would be just like, what practical application do we have? So if I had a high schooler, I would be moving them towards anything machine learning related. If I was a young person coming up into the ranks in the FileMaker community, I would be wielding the sword of machine learning as the differentiator for me within the space. And frankly, let's face it, like we're always looking for opportunities and differentiators. We're a ecosystem full of individuals who've been doing this for 30 something years. If you really want to differentiate, then zig when everyone else is zagging. And that's where you move towards the most aggressive bleeding edge technologies. It used to be, like I said before, JavaScript integrations with web viewers. It's a very small community that's moved there with great upside. Present company can speak to that. And then API integrations, like we're no fewer than like a third of the line items that we bill out to our customers right now on every project across all different scopes is API and integration related now. And imagine if I had just turned as a business owner, turned my the other cheek to the existence of these modern technologies and said, nah, I don't believe in it. No, I have one third of my revenue would be gone, and who knows where it's going to go in the future. So I am using the same logic towards machine learning and education thereof. And frankly, it's fascinating. And once you learn more and more about it, you're going to start to see, oh yeah, there's models everywhere.
I would love a model to alert me on my phone whenever I get near Disney World that says, Jeremy, you don't have any money left in your budget, so turn
Well,
around and go home.
you just so this is my prediction for the future, Jeremy. And this might be a good way for us to wrap all this stuff up. That exact example that you just gave. So here's why you don't have that already, because you just described various different models. You just described the model that's on your phone that knows where you are and where you've been and predicts what you're doing at Disney and that kind of thing. The model that knows what your finances are and what your spending habits are, that's a totally different one. That's owned by your bank or whatever, right? And then the Netflix one and the Amazon one and all these. I believe that I'm confident that in our current reality, we have dozens, if not hundreds of these models that are independently being created from our role, primarily as consumers, right? Because people are making money off of these, whether it be the aforementioned Amazon purchases or what we watch on Netflix or just everything Google. But as personal, the other thing that's really interesting is everything's a model, whether you're realizing it or not. And the sooner you realize it, the more amazed you'll be by it. But also, what's happening is personal data privacy. Like it's never been a bigger issue about who's tracking me and consumer tracking. And we're really going to see a rapid decrease in that. So I think there's going to be a really important moment. This is like my thought that I'll throw out to people. There's going to be an important moment where instead of having tons of these different models that are constantly tracking us, we'll probably get to absolute zero on tracking. And then what we'll have to do is have opt into a single model. And I predict that this will be a silly comment in 2-3 years from now. We'll be like, oh, really? But now it seems a little space age. But we'll have one single model. Let's call it a self model. So I'll have the Cris Ippolite model, you'll have the Jeremy Brown model, and it will have all of that stuff in one data pool. Where you're going, what you do when you get there, how much money you generally need when you go during the week as opposed to a weekend night or whatever. All that information will be there and it will be driving this. And everyone will be able to train every action that you do, every decision you make, every dislike will be training that model on the fly. You'll have this secure model with every one of those likes and dislikes, and it'll be correlated with our actions and decisions until finally every interaction with the world around us will appear to be thought driven, like what you just described, but it'll really just be our self models that are making decisions 1 second ahead of our brains. And honestly, I look forward to it.
Oh, wow.
I look forward to the road rising in front of me because I know what I want to do and I'm not thinking about it at the moment. I'm not talking about being spammed constantly every time we have a thought, there's a product. Like I really think data privacy is going to eliminate that part of it. Like the whole Minority Report scene where he's walking down the street and all that. I don't think data privacy is going to let us get there. I think it's just going to be exactly what you said. Before you even leave the house or before you text somebody about going to Disney, they're like, yeah, not today. Just save me the whole hassle in the first place. Or when I'm there, it'll be like, hey, don't go towards this ride or that ride because I know, but last time we were here, blah, blah. Like, I can't even come up with examples because it's too esoteric, but That's what I believe is going to happen. We're going to have our own self models that are thinking just a second ahead of what our brains are doing. And then when you fold that into the kind of stuff that like Elon Musk is doing with putting chips into your brain to actually bridge the gap between synapses firing and these models, that is in fact, and he says we're like a year away from that as we record this podcast. So that's my sorry I ruined everybody's day. Or maybe made it, but machine learning is real. You're already immersed in it. It's the bar has been lowered, so it's easy for us to get to this and leverage these within our own business practices and applications that we're building for customers. And the more we lean into it, the more impactful the services that we're providing for people will be.
Picking up something that is just coming down the pipe. It's picking up machine learning. It's starting to be able to use that. Do you have predictions about how it's going to evolve inside of our platform?
Yeah, I'm doing everything I can to try to influence that.
All right, wonderful. This is very alarming and exciting. And
Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah. I thought I would, honestly, I haven't touched this machine learning stuff at all in FileMaker, and I feel like I try to stay on top of the latest technology, so I'm going to have to get into that and see what that's about. I can't preach being up on the latest technologies if I haven't touched that stuff yet. So I need to get.
Yeah, hopefully we've inspired some folks that are listening that stuck with this. At the very least, it's fascinating and magical. And there's so much surprise and delight built into understanding machine learning and finally building your own models that I hope that's enough for people to embark on this quest, just like what I've reported here. If you just want to see it in action and get your mitts on it pretty quickly, after that point, you'll start having that awareness of what kind of models you might need or train for yourself, or at least be able to speak intelligently with what can be done in the platform for your customers.
All right, Chris, this is great. Where can people reach out and ask you questions about?
Absolutely. I'm always interested in hearing from folks. You, of course, can interact with us over at iSolutionsAi.com on our corresponding Twitter and LinkedIn accounts as well, too. We always love having conversations with individuals. And if you see me in the hallways when we start getting back into in-person events, pull me aside and just say machine learning and we'll chat. But yeah, I'll have a bunch of stuff coming out on the iSolutions YouTube channels. There's a ton of stuff out there already. If you go check out our iSolutionsAi website and under articles, you'll see a bunch of stuff on machine learning and some videos that I've already been working on in the lab.
Great. Very good, Chris. It's great to talk with you. And when FileMaker can create itself an app out of the text that I write, we'll have you back on and you can describe that for us.
Sounds good. Hopefully by that time you can just have the machine learning model of me.
Yeah, we could bring up Cris Ippolite bot, right?
Right,
And just ask him questions. Or is it? I don't know.
Or have you been talking to the Cris Ippolite bot this whole time? I'll leave that with you for today.
Brain explode. All right, man.
Thanks, Jeremy. This has been fun as usual.
Good to talk to you. Bye-bye. And that brings us to the end of another episode of the Context Podcast. Thanks to Cris Ippolite, at least I think I was talking to the real Chris, for clarifying the power we have now in machine learning in FileMaker. I'm intrigued what I can do with it. It's a bit scary, but it's important to stay on top of new and high-powered technologies that touch our platform, so I'm going to be taking a look in depth in the next weeks. If you're interested in working with machine learning, check out the links in the show notes. Refer to Cris Ippolite's site to see it in action and take a look at the video that Claris just released about this wonderful app. If you're so inclined, please rate and review us at Apple Podcasts. We're incredibly interested in your thoughts and your show ideas. And volunteer to lend your experience, perspective, and voice to the podcast by sharing what you have to say about a particular topic near and in the platform in which we work and play and learn. Talk to you next time.